However, honestly, do they? Ever since former Liberian President Ellen Johnson-Sirleaf made history in 2006 as the first democratically elected female head of state in Africa, though few, more women since have held political office at the highest level, including Tanzanian President Samia Suluhu Hassan. She recently marked 1 year in office as the country's first female president and Africa's only sitting female leader. According to 2020 data from the IPU UN Women Map of Women in Politics, Rwanda now has the highest percentage of women in parliamentary positions in the world. Also ranked in the top 20 are South Africa, Namibia, Senegal, and Mozambique. Is gender equality in African politics achievable? We'll examine this and more on today's edition of Our Voices as we commemorate International Women's History Month. Hello, I'm Demiake Mwakaliele, and this is Our Voices. On today's program, we are commemorating International Women's Month and reflecting on the accomplishments that African women are making in leadership roles despite the many challenges that they face. We'll also examine how best to attain gender equality for women rising in politics and business, and if quotas work. This year's International Women's Day, celebrated on March 8th, focused on the global state of women when it comes to gender equality, bias, stereotypes, and discrimination. The goal is to make the world more diverse, equitable, and inclusive for women. VOA's Laurel Bowman has that story.
We've heard the famous quotes, "Behind every great woman is another great woman. Investing in a woman is investing in a community. When women move forward, the world moves with them." International Women's Day on March 8th invites the world to focus on where women are and where they need to go. In the United States, the U.S. Chamber of Commerce Foundation held a virtual two-day forum to highlight International Women's Day. Paloma Adams-Allen is with USAID.
Real progress has been made in recent decades, yet women and girls continue to shoulder a profoundly disproportionate burden of the impacts of today's global challenges.
There were shout-outs for women in Ukraine, whose country is under attack by Russia.
As the conflict continues to unfold, we're seeing women play a crucial role in resisting Russia's campaign of violence, responding to the urgent needs of their communities, combating disinformation, taking up arms to fight, and engaging on the diplomatic front.
Experts also noted that women around the world have carried a good bulk of the burden in responding to the global COVID-19 pandemic, as both healthcare workers and caregivers, both in the home and in the workplace.
Child care, elder care, home care, too often are inaccessible and unaffordable, while at the same time, care workers scramble to care for their own families, even as they take care of others.
Meantime, women were forced out of jobs during the COVID-19 pandemic. In the U.S., more than 3 million women exited the labor market over the past 2 years, according to the U.S. Chamber of Commerce Foundation, with women's participation in the workplace lower than it's been in over 30 years. And women and girls are more likely to be killed by natural disasters as the rate and severity of climate shocks increase globally, according to USAID. Advocates for women's rights would also like to see more women in top government and political roles.
We need to have more girls and women participating in civics and politics. I think even when we are almost 49% of the population, we are not equally represented in the positions of power.
Experts laud the progress women have made so far, but want to see more when it comes to gender equity, diversity, and inclusiveness. Laurel Bowman, VOA News, Washington.
I had an opportunity to speak with Eve Thompson, the author of Leading Women of Africa, about the political advancement of women on the continent. She joined me from South Africa to discuss the concept behind the book, a scholastic material detailing the leadership journey of African women, including former President of Malawi, Joyce Banda.
This whole book just came about through a confluence of events and circumstances related to the pandemic. We were locked down. At the same time, I'm raising 2 young girls in my household. And I was shocked to find that one girl in particular was being assigned comprehension readers about dead white American men. This is Africa. Why are we reading about Ben Franklin? It's not to say that he's not an inspiring person, but we need obviously people that young Black girls can relate to. I identified young African women to interview established women on the African continent. Mm-hmm. And that's how this came about, through Zoom. And so then we took the Zoom interviews and distilled those into comprehension readers. The other thing that it also serves is to expose young people to different careers. We've got a biochemist featured, we've got lawyers, we've got a woman who focuses on the psychological damage to children as a result of losing their parents, et cetera.
Well, let's zone in on one of them, the former president of Malawi, Joyce Banda.
Right.
What are the qualities that you found in her that you'd love to see exuded and incorporated into the audience that you're targeting this book for?
Well, I love her humility. Actually, I first met her through my work, and she took an Uber to meet me. And from what I understand, she was living with her daughter in a modest apartment in Virginia. And the funny thing is, she was accused falsely of being involved in a scandal, in a corruption scandal in Malawi. And I thought to myself, if she's involved in corruption, she would be living a lot more large than this in the U.S. And that's another challenge that women face who dare to go into politics. And so the other thing that I admire about her is her courage, that she is someone who dared to challenge the patriarchy and the power relation status quo in Africa, not just in Malawi, but in Africa as a whole.
Tell me about how you're using the experience that you're having in Africa and how you're channeling it through, the role that you play as a mom, as a lawyer, as a, mentor.
This continent is replete with inspiration. In my work, I've often worked with historically disadvantaged and marginalized people on this continent. And they're the ones who have to fight the most. And so as a result, they're the ones who are the most inspiring. And so I love to work with women, youth, people with disabilities. And because it's not because I'm the one who's necessarily doing for them, they have done so much for me in terms of the inspirational stories that they come with. And I feel like I've been privileged to be here and to soak it all in. And, if I think of what my life would have been like had I stayed back in the US, I wouldn't be as expanded a person as I am.
It's time for a short break. When we come back, we'll take a look at how South African women are the hardest hit and suffer the greatest inequality in the world, according to a recent World Bank report. Stay with us.
On VOA Our Voices, women are using their voices to empower,
to nurture, to educate,
to stand up in any language.
Amajgriyachu,
Dimsachan, Warioyamu,
Mazwi Edu.
Our Voices.
Welcome back. This is Our Voices. Now, a World Bank study reveals that South Africa is the most unequal country in the world, with women of color the hardest hit by unemployment and gender-based violence, both of which were made worse by the COVID-19 pandemic. While analysts say apartheid and poor governance are to blame, community aid groups are working to address the issues. Linda Givstash reports from Johannesburg.
The consequences of inequality are playing out every day in the historically Black community of Soweto. The nonprofit group Phenomenal Women, which supports victims of gender-based violence, was due to open this office space nearly a year ago, but it was destroyed by vandals. Organizers say it's another side effect of high unemployment, rising drug use, and crime.
People struggle on a daily basis just to get by, just to put one plate of food on the table. So it's joblessness, there's no job opportunities. That's where GBV plays a huge part, because remember, if the woman is unemployed, the husband goes to work, he feels that he's the one bringing in the money. It puts her in a very vulnerable position.
Phenomenal Women has expanded its work beyond gender-based violence. This hub was intended to offer skills training and a community library and act as a base for its food drives. It's also collaborating with community agricultural programs to create jobs for youth. The idea is to break the cycle of violence and poverty with opportunities.
No one gets a job. We've been applying here, but no one gets a job. So we decided, actually, let's turn into agriculture. For someone my age, the worst case scenario is someone just turning into gangsterism, because that's let me just say, in a place like this, that's the easy way out.
The issue goes back generations. The World Bank found that the country's history of racial segregation is continuing to leave Black Africans economically disadvantaged.
What it means is that those children that are disadvantaged from birth are never going to reach their full potential. And if they don't reach their full potential, then the country doesn't meet their full potential.
Better education and more equitable land ownership are among the solutions. The country already has affirmative action legislation that prioritizes hiring historically disadvantaged groups. But some experts say the policy has been abused and allowed nepotism and corruption, keeping the wealth in the hands of a few.
We've seen instances of specifically Black women not getting the promotion because of a quota system, which says you're allowed 3 Black women and 3 Black men and 1 white woman and 1 white man. Trying to get a rainbow brochure in every department is having explicit detrimental effect on Black women. I think that's just more evidence that it's crazy and that we should be going by merit.
Despite the challenges, he says Black South Africans are increasingly among the country's wealthiest people. The World Bank says the government's taxation and wealth redistribution programs have made life better for the poorest. But the gap is widening. And with relentlessly rising unemployment rates, parents like Swartz are left wondering if their hard work would be more fruitful abroad.
I can't promise my child he's going to get a job. He doesn't work. He's done with school, but there's no opportunity for him. This is my own personal experience. So I don't know what the future of South Africa looks like. But for me personally, there's no future for us. There's no future for my kids.
Whether it's for major improvements at home or new prospects abroad, the inequality has many South Africans wishing for a better life. Linda Giftash for VOA News, Johannesburg.
Many view gender quotas as a measure for boosting women's access to policy-making bodies and boardrooms worldwide. More than 20 African countries are legislating quotas or are home to political parties that have adopted them voluntarily, like South Africa's African National Congress. For more perspective on quotas and if they can secure gender equality for African women, I spoke with my Our Voices co-hosts.
It's difficult to really determine how much progress women have made, at least in terms of the 1995 conference in Beijing. But many do argue that there is a lot that is being done. In Somalia, for example, just recently, a very, very upcoming legislator, Amina Mohammed Abdi, was killed by Al-Shabaab. And that obviously is a deterrent for a lot of women trying to make inroads. Simanish, can you give us some insight into what you see as the challenges that women face? And, you can use Somalia as an example.
Thank you, Ndimiake. Yes, I mean, still there are various barriers for women and girls' full participation in the socio-economic development in their countries. And Somalia is one example. Despite the challenge, the country is preparing for an election. And it was the prime minister who said that 1/3 of the parliament seat is reserved for women, and that is 30% of the parliament seat. And that excited many women advocates, and that's because they know the struggle and the challenge the gender goes through, so they will help bring change. But that's not the reality. Actually, out of the 275 seats the Somalia's lower house has, the clan leaders so far picked only 44 women. And as we just said, a 33-year-old Amina Mohammed was killed in a bomb blast after an attacker took her. And these are the challenge they go through. They are rejected, they are threatened, they are killed. But in countries like Somalia, where the country has been in civil war for decades, women's participation, be it in government or any other decision-making platforms, could be a game changer to bring sustainable peace.
Well, I want to move to Nigeria, and Amina, I'm sure you've got something to share here. The women there are not just sitting around waiting for things to happen. They are literally taking it to the streets, right?
Yes.
Tell us about that.
So right now, the women in Nigeria are essentially asking for a type of affirmative action. They would like to see 35% representation in government, in the president's cabinet. And, it's well deserved because we are the population, the majority of the population of the country. Right now, the government is trying to amend the constitution. So they're making a few amendments. And part of these amendments, one of the proposals was making sure that there's 35% representation of women in the government at all times, with no exception. Because even though in Nigeria we see a fair, decent representation of women in government, it's something that can be taken away depending on depending on the government that you have, depending on the party that's in power. So women would like to have that security. They want it to be part of the constitution. They want it to be a formula that's part of what makes up government. The second thing that they're protesting about is the issue of citizenship. So right now, a Nigerian man can marry a foreign woman and she is eligible for Nigerian citizenship. She can naturalize. But a Nigerian woman doesn't have the same privilege. So when she marries a man and brings him to Nigeria, he is not eligible to file for citizenship. He cannot naturalize. So this is one of many issues that they are pushing. And that is why women are taking to the streets to protest this issue.
Thank you, Amina. That's great insight into what's going on in Nigeria. Now, there are some positives, one can say, on the African continent. As we speak, there is a female president in Tanzania, and there's also a female president in Ethiopia, even though it's more of a ceremonial role. And also, people always point to Rwanda as a country that has got it right when it comes to women representation, over 50%, right? Oriane, what can you tell us about what that means in terms of the inroads that women are making?
Right. When we go into East Africa, the most countries have met the 30% parliament quota that many nations have in Africa. The notable number is still in Rwanda, as you've mentioned, 60% of parliament are women. Now, for leadership positions, or especially government structures, the Gender Policy Journal at Harvard University, when taking a closer look at quotas, they found that quotas can get women elected into positions of power, but they do not by themselves guarantee a voice of influence without additional structure or cultural change. The journal also found that women who have held positions in public and offices are still treated less than equal in private and domestic life. And the Rwanda women have played an important role in supporting peace and development as public servants, but numerical representation alone is incomplete to use as a measure in gender equality. So for solution, what they do offer, though, is the case of Malawi, where women there have played a role in passing the HIV and AIDS Act, largely because they were involved in relevant committees in the parliament. And other analysis that they've seen is in Uganda, where parliament has recommended that the purpose of quotas be articulated to better reflect a goal for gender equality for the broader society. The Harvard Journal maintains that it would be a mistake to solely judge the fight for women's rights and political power based upon these numbers. So essentially, in order for the quotas to be really important and relevant and for women to have influence, we must accompany them with a structural and cultural change. And I do agree with that analysis.
Well, thank you, Oriane. That is really critical information, that women can make an impact and you don't necessarily have to be at the head of the table.
Ladies, thank you so much for joining me for such an interesting discussion. It's time now for another break. But first, let us know your thoughts on quotas. Is this the solution to gender inequality in politics and business? Tell us on our social media platforms. We are on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Our handle is at VOA Our Voices. We are also on WhatsApp. Our number is on your screen. Now, when we return, we'll introduce you to 3 African women honored for their courage. Stay with us. Welcome back. You're watching Our Voices. It's time now for our Women to Watch segment with Simanyesh Yakoye. Simanyesh?
Thanks, Ndimiake, and hello, everyone. I'm pleased to bring you this week's Women to Watch segment. The U.S. State Department recently awarded 12 women from around the world with the 2022 International Women of Courage Award for their exceptional courage, strength, and leadership in advocating for peace, justice, human rights, gender equity, and equality, often at great personal risk and sacrifice. 3 of these women are African, from South Africa, Liberia, and Libya. Let us begin with Roshanda Pasco, the only witness to testify at a 2019 murder trial that resulted in the conviction of a notorious gang leader and his 2 accomplices who terrorized the Cape Flats community just outside Cape Town, South Africa. She faced death threats because of her testimony. Fasia Boyano faced harassment while advocating for women's rights and protection against sexual violence in Liberia. She gave up her job as a journalist to become a co-founder of the Liberian Feminist Forum, a campaign for broader and equal political participation in the country, which elected Africa's first female president. Lastly, Najla Mangush. 1 year ago, she accepted the role of foreign minister in the UN-backed transitional government of Libya, a country deeply divided by a decade of civil war since the fall of Muammar Gaddafi in 2011. A lawyer and human rights advocate, Mangush is part of the Government of National Unity, a UN-based administration installed in Tripoli in early 2021 as a transition to an elected government. Presidential and parliamentary elections, originally set for December, are being delayed and have not yet been rescheduled. The new government, appointed on March 1st by Libya's parliament in challenging the unity government's mandate, putting Mangush's cabinet post at risk. This trio from Africa are among 12 women from Brazil to Bangladesh, Nepal to Vietnam, who the U.S. State Department honored for fighting corruption, gender violence, and discrimination to build more open, peaceful societies. VOA's congressional correspondent Catherine Gibson has more on the 16th Annual International Women of Courage Awards.
A celebration of women and a somber reminder of the dangers they face around the world. Just days after women marched in the streets for International Women's Day, the U.S. State Department recognized 12 women across the globe for their courageous work while pausing to remember the women of Ukraine.
Millions of Ukrainian women have fled their country with their families. Millions more have stayed to help their country fight against Russia's unprovoked, unjustified war. I saw many of them on the border with Poland just about a week ago. And it's something that stays embedded in your mind and memory as you see women coming across the border, children in tow, fleeing the Russian aggression.
Advocating for more peaceful, open societies is a common theme among the 12 women honored this year.
This year's Women of Courage are making our world more peaceful, more just. Across 4 continents, they're tackling complex challenges from organized crime to environmental degradation. They're advancing the rights of women, girls, LGBTQI+ people, and other marginalized groups. And despite harassment, violence, imprisonment, they persist.
From Liberian women rights activist Fasia Boyano Harris.
Her bravery to stand up to counter protesters and aggressive security personnel were pivotal during a 3-day anti-rape protest in August 2020 that directly led President George Weah declaring rape a national emergency and announcing other initiatives crucial to protecting Liberian women.
To Moldovan parliamentarian Doina German.
She led the passage of landmark legislation establishing electoral gender quotas that resulted in women now holding 40% of the seats in Moldova's parliament, an all-time high.
These women have redefined courage, said keynote speaker and honoree Naja Mangush, the first female foreign minister of Libya.
When you decide to listen to your true self, when it is hard to speak up, when you decide to be a woman in senior position, knowing that that means will you be under the microscope all the time, being judged, criticized, and bullied, that courage. Women who decide to risk it all and leave their home, countries, their safe havens, in search of self-fulfillment elsewhere, that is courage.
First Lady Jill Biden said telling these stories of courage advances women everywhere.
To all women of courage, those fighting injustice in Latin America or hoping to learn in the Middle East, working for democracy and stability in Europe, protecting their families in sub-Saharan Africa, or speaking out against gender violence in Asia. We will continue to work with passion and persistence, with development and democracy, to stop those who wish to silence you. And we will tell your stories, even when you cannot.
More than 167 women from dozens of countries have been honored with the award since 2007. Catherine Gibson, VOA News, Washington.
Do you know any other woman of courage? Please let us know and share your comments using the hashtag VOA Our Voices. Until next time, I am Simanish.
Thank you, Simanish. Well, that's our show for this week. To catch up on the latest episodes of Our Voices, visit the VOA website at voanews.com or YouTube. Thanks to my Our Voices colleagues, Amina, Oriane, and Simanish, and on behalf of everyone at the Voice of America, I'm Dimyake Mwakalielie saying thank you so much for watching. Stay safe